You're surrounded by this invisible force, right? A constant, silent hum inside the walls that powers, well, everything in your life. Today, in this explainer, we're going to pull back the curtain on that very force, alternating current.
Okay, let's get right into it. We're going to start with a legendary rivalry, the War of Currents. Then we'll peek under the hood at what AC actually is, see how it behaves in a circuit, and uncover this kind of electrical magic called resonance. And finally, we'll look at the simple, brilliant gadget that made AC the undisputed king.
So let's rewind the clock. Back in the late 19th century, they had a huge problem. How do you send power over long distances without it just fizzling out? And believe me, this wasn't just some technical debate. It was an all-out war of ideas.
This set the stage for a massive showdown. In one corner, you had Thomas Edison pushing his direct current, or DC. That's a steady, one-way flow of power. But in the other corner, Nikola Tesla and George Westinghouse were betting on something totally different, alternating current, or AC, where the flow literally flips back and forth. The big issue? Edison's DC was terrible for long distances, but AC, well, AC had a secret weapon.
And this was the absolute game changer, a device called a transformer. See, with AC, you could use a transformer to crank the voltage way up, send it hundreds of miles with almost no power loss, and then use another one to step it right back down to a safe level for your home. It was an elegant solution DC just couldn't compete with, and just like that, the war was over.
So, AC won the war, we know that. But what is it really? Let's dig into the physics a bit, because that voltage number you see on your appliances, yeah, it's hiding something much bigger. So unlike DC, which is just a steady, flat line of power, AC is constantly in motion. The voltage and the current are always oscillating. They rise up to a peak, fall down through zero, dip to a low point, and then rise back up again. It creates this smooth, continuous wave, just like a sine wave you might remember from math class.
Now let's talk about the numbers for a second, because this is where it gets really interesting. We all say our wall sockets have 220 volts, but that's not exactly true.
Right, so that 220 volts, that's actually just a special kind of average. It's called the RMS value, and it just makes it easy to compare the power output to DC. But in reality, as that AC wave is swinging back and forth, the voltage coming out of your outlet is actually hitting a peak of 311 volts. That's the real power surging through the wires. So, what happens when this wave of electricity actually meets the different parts inside a circuit? Well, as you're about to see, the three main components, resistors, inductors, and capacitors, each have their own unique personality when dealing with AC. Let's start with something simple, a resistor. Think of the heating element in a toaster. It resists the flow of electricity, obviously, but it doesn't mess with the timing at all. The voltage and the current waves move together perfectly. When voltage is at its peak, current is at its peak. They're totally in sync. Or, as engineers would say, they're in phase. And you can see that perfect sync right here. Look at how the waves for voltage and current are moving in perfect lockstep. They hit their highs and lows at the exact same moment. With a resistor, it's simple, no drama. The rhythm you put in is the rhythm you get out.
But then you have inductors, which are basically just coils of wire, and they are different. They have a kind of electrical inertia. They don't mind a steady flow, but they hate change. So the faster you try to make the AC switch directions, the more the inductor pushes back. And that pushback is called inductive reactance. And all that inertia, that resistance to change, it creates a delay. The voltage wave is trying to lead the way, but the current just can't keep up. It's always playing catch-up. You can see it here. The current wave is always lagging just a little bit behind the voltage, always by 1/4 of a full cycle.
And then there are capacitors. They store and release energy, and they are the total opposite of inductors. Instead of hating change, they kind of thrive on it. The faster the AC frequency, the less a capacitor resists the flow. It's like high-speed currents can just zip right on through. So if an inductor puts the brakes on the current, a capacitor basically hits the accelerator. The current rushes out ahead of the voltage, and you can see it right here. The current wave hits its peak first, getting a head start and leading the voltage by that very same quarter cycle. Now this is where it gets really cool. What happens when you put an inductor and a capacitor in the same circuit? Well, the lagging effect from the inductor and the leading effect from the capacitor can actually go head to head.
You know, the best way to think about this is like pushing someone on a swing. A swing has a natural rhythm, right?
If you just push it randomly, nothing much happens. But if you time your pushes perfectly at its natural frequency, those small pushes add up and the swing goes higher and higher. It's the exact same idea with electricity.
In a circuit, that perfect push happens at a very specific frequency called the resonant frequency. And at this one sweet spot, the inductor's lag and the capacitor's lead perfectly cancel each other out. When that happens, the total opposition to the current just plummets, and the current surges through, creating that huge spike you see on the graph.
And this whole principle, it's exactly how you tune a radio. See, the air around you is flooded with signals from tons of different stations. When you turn that tuning knob, you're actually changing the capacitor inside the radio. That changes the circuit's resonant frequency. And when you dial it in just right to match your favorite station's frequency, bam! The current for that one signal gets massively amplified, and all the others are ignored. That's how you hear the music.
Which brings us right back to the beginning. Back to AC's secret weapon, the device that sealed its victory and literally built the world's power grids, the transformer.
A transformer is actually pretty simple. It's just two coils of wire wrapped around an iron core. The magic is all in the ratio of the wired turns. If the second coil has more turns than the first, you step up the voltage. But you can't get energy from nothing, so the current has to go down. And if it has fewer turns, you step down the voltage and the current goes up. It's a simple, brilliant trade-off.
And that simple idea is why our entire power grid works. Electricity is generated at a power plant. Then it's stepped way up to hundreds of thousands of volts for transmission. This makes the current super low, which cuts down on energy lost as heat. Then, as it gets closer to your town, it's stepped down in stages until it finally arrives at your home at a safe, usable 220 volts.
So when you step back and look at the whole picture, the story of AC is just incredible. It won the war of currents because of one simple device, the transformer, that let it travel huge distances. That electrical wave, with a peak voltage way higher than what it says on the box, can be perfectly controlled by components that either slow it down or speed it up. And that perfect balancing act is what lets us tune a radio. It all comes together to create this invisible, continent-spanning grid that powers our entire world.
It's just a fascinating thought, isn't it? This constant invisible dance happening in the walls all around us, powering our lives. And it really makes you wonder, what other unseen forces, what other hidden systems are we taking for granted every single day?